Hello, everybody. How are you guys doing this evening? Hopefully, you guys are all doing well. Um, it has been a crazy, hectic last 2 weeks for me. We got like a crazy heat wave that came through and kind of took us off guard. We've been, kind of like a lot of the other parts in the country, we kind of been having a pretty mild summer. And all of the sudden, we got, for us, for our first heat wave, it hit about 112, 113 or something like that. So it kind of just took us off guard, and we had a lot of customers that weren't that hadn't been maintaining their equipment, and basically all the crap hit the fan, and it was just a crazy week. So that's why I missed the stream last week. It was just a busy one. So I am going to pay attention to the chat here in just a few minutes, but I just want to cover a few things, and then I'll start paying attention and looking at that. So as usual, guys, if you have questions or things that you want me, or topics you want me to cover or whatnot, make sure you put them in caps lock so I can get to them, and I'll try to catch up with them, okay? So I have a couple, since I did my last stream, I've had probably 4 videos now, I think, right? Because I missed a stream. Yeah, so I think about 4 videos. We had it's kind of strange because, from a creator's side, I can never tell how a video is going to do. There's different things. Like I can mainly tell that if I release a video typically and it has something to do with a walk-in cooler or a walk-in freezer, it will do really well. Okay. Typically, and really well within the first 2 days is, 8,000, 9,000 views or something like that. But for some reason, I don't know what it is. Air conditioning, I appreciate doing air conditioning videos. And sometimes I release videos where I think, oh man, this has some really great technical topics in it. And then they just fall flat. People don't tend to enjoy them or whatever reason it is. Some people enjoy them, but it just doesn't attract the masses or something, Mr. Johnny Boy, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. But I released a video, I think it was on a carrier package unit. And that one's just like, I don't know. Sometimes I scratch my head on why a video does what it does. And that one's just like exploding, and, people are really, really enjoying that one. And, it is what it is. I try to share the little bit of knowledge that I have. Sometimes, people like to hear certain things, and I guess that's what it is. So whatever. I'm just kind of rambling at this point. So, I have, some things we want to talk about here. I'm going to cover a few little topics here. I just had a quick question. Actually came in yesterday actually. Someone asked me what condenser coil and evaporator coil cleaners do I recommend. Okay, so I really, really like using the Refrigeration Technologies products. Okay, they have their Hvacr coil cleaners. They make very, very good products. One of the problems with the Refrigeration Technologies stuff is they don't make it into all the most popular supply houses, and they don't stock them like they do new Calgon products, okay? I don't want to talk crap on new Calgon because I still do use their stuff. Sometimes I have to, because if I'm out at a job and I need 2 cases of coil cleaner to do, 4 or 5 ACs, a lot of times they don't have the Refrigeration Technologies products, and I can't stock 2 cases on my truck at all times. You just never know. I'll usually keep like a bottle or 2 of the Hvacr cleaners. But I really like the Hvacr stuff. And the reason why I like it is because it's less harsh on the system. Their heavy duty cleaner, it will foam up. Okay. Not as much as like the New Bright stuff, but what it doesn't do, and I really appreciate it, is it doesn't etch the coil. Okay. If you guys don't already know, when you're using coil cleaners, some people say, well, that coil's not clean. It's not all shiny. Usually if it's shiny and it turns all like brand new looking metal, it's because it ate the top layer of the metal off. It's etching it. Okay. And the Hvacr heavy duty cleaner doesn't etch the coil. It doesn't eat the top layer away. Therefore, it's actually safe to be used on aluminum microchannel coils too. So it's a really, really great cleaner. It does kind of bubble up, so you do have to be careful if you're using it on a microchannel condenser. When you have to make sure you rinse it really well, because it's kind of like using Dawn dish detergent. There'll be soap suds that'll be left in the condenser, and when you go to turn it back on, all of a sudden you'll get bubbles popping everywhere and blowing out the unit like you're having a foam party in Vegas or something. So you got to be careful about that. Travis Whitaker. That was one of the questions that I was going to answer. That's actually on my list. Someone had a funny response to your question earlier. So Travis Whitaker says he's starting technical school and he wants to know if he needs pants and boots or can I wear anything. Someone had answered earlier that you should always wear pants to school. Okay. And he was joking, saying that you need to wear pants in general. But You do ask a good question, Travis. And okay, here's how I would suggest it. You need to find out the format of your school, okay? I would highly suggest that when you're doing lab days, if you're going to be working with any equipment, that yes, you wear jean pants and steel toe boots, okay? And the school may even require that. Some of the private schools, they require you to wear a uniform, okay? But if you're just going to, you just need to check with the school. But it's still best practices to bring safety glasses with you, to wear jean pants, and to wear boots. Yes, that is a good idea. Now, if you're going just for like lecture class, it may be a little more casual and maybe you don't need to wear that stuff, okay? But if there's any chance you're going to be working out in the lab, I would highly suggest that you come dressed accordingly, okay? Same thing, I'm going to segue into an interview. I highly recommend that anybody that goes into an interview for an HVAC technician job, okay, it's different if you're going to become a service manager or something like that, but for a technician job, in my opinion, you should go to that interview dressed ready to work, okay? Blue jeans, steel toe boots, a shirt that you can work in. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it's not really necessary to go to an HVAC service technician interview in a suit and tie. That's just unpractical. If someone comes to interview with me and, there's a chance that I really like them, like there was one person that we liked him a lot and I took him on a ride along that day. And he went to work with me. So, it is what it is. But yes, you should always go dressed and ready for school. So, all right, let me see. All right. I'm seeing if I'm missing anything here. Hello to everybody. How y'all doing? I see a bunch of you guys are in here. It's really cool. Remember, let's put the questions in caps lock. Okay. And let me see how we're doing. I just want to see how many people are in here at the moment. So let me go to my video view right here. Just one second. I want to cover a topic, but I wanted to make sure that most people are in here before I start really talking about it. So let me click on this. Bear with me here, guys, for 1 second. Okay, there we are right there. And let's see what we got going on. Okay, cool. So yeah, we got a good amount of people in here right now. So I will go ahead and address what I want to address. So as most of you guys probably already know, and I just want to go ahead and cover it, one of our very good friends, Zach Ciota, had an incident at his house yesterday on Father's Day. It was kind of interesting because we were all waiting for the skilled trade up event, because Zach has been on a hiatus too because he's been upgrading his show and doing some new stuff. So yesterday was supposed to be the first day of the skilled trade up, and he was going to come back out with his game show. And all of a sudden he had to cancel his show. Okay. If you guys are living under a rock and you haven't heard yet, what happened was Zach actually released a video talking about it, but his house caught on fire and pretty much the entire thing burned down. Everybody was okay. And his family happened to be in his studio with him, is what he said on his video. So it's just kind of a bummer though. I mean, not that there's any good day for something like that to happen, but it was Father's Day, and they were just chilling out in his back studio. So thank goodness that everybody was out in his back studio. Nobody was in the house. Thank goodness that nobody was hurt, but they still are in a real crappy situation. So I normally wouldn't do this, but I'm going to ask you guys if anybody thinks that they potentially could possibly help him out. Okay. Anything, $1, $2, whatever you guys got. I know he's not asking for it, but he would greatly appreciate it. You guys, he lost everything. Okay. They've got to start from scratch. Yes, they had insurance. Yes, their house is more than likely going to get replaced. Yes, they're going to put him up in a house in the meantime, but it's the little things, guys. Diapers, things like that. And yes, he's part of his church, and I know his church is probably going to help him too, but if we can help him, I think that'd be a great thing. Okay. Personally, I will go ahead and post a link right here to his Gmail account. Let me go ahead and put this in here. If you guys are interested, you can use this link to donate to his PayPal. That would greatly help him. If anybody here is interested in sending him a check, because that's what I'm going to do. Okay. I know that PayPal is more convenient for a lot of people. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send him a check because nobody's going to get a cut of that. I have his personal address. And if you guys are interested in that, I would highly suggest that you guys send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I'm going to type that in here. and I will share his address with you. That way, if you guys are interested in sending him a check, if you guys can't, you can't. Okay. Don't put yourselves out. Don't put yourself in a position, but if you have an extra $1 or $2 to spare, you know, let's help a brother out. Okay. Zach has been a great person for me in doing these streams, and he's part of the reason that I can do these streams, because I had no idea what I was doing. So I got to say thank you to him, because he was the one that answered all my questions when I reached out to him to say, hey, you know, how did you do this and how did you do that? Zach has always been forthcoming and been a really cool friend to me to help me out and explain how things work and stuff. So I'm going to send him a check personally just because I can. Okay. And you know, if you guys can help, that'd be great. I'll mention it towards the end of the stream too. I have a lot more stuff I want to cover, but I'll mention it towards the end of the stream also. So, but I know he would appreciate it, even though he's not asking for it. I know he would greatly appreciate it. So, let's see what else. I'm sure, guys, that they probably, can use help with anything. I don't know exactly what they need. And there's all the other YouTuber guys that are friends with Zach are all going to say stuff about this too. So we'll know more as time goes on. Okay. But Zach did mention in his video that he does have insurance. Okay. So we're thankful for that, because insurance will help, but you just know that things, you know, it takes a while for all that stuff to kick in. I couldn't imagine, you know, with, you know, Zach has an infant at home. I know everybody's going through circumstances, guys. I'm not trying to downplay anything that you guys are going through too. Okay. I just happen to have a platform and I'm talking about what, you know, the situation that Zach's in. Okay. So I don't want it to seem like I'm telling you guys you have to donate to him or anything like that. Okay. And that's not what this whole stream is going to be about, but I just want to, make sure that you guys know what happened. So, all right, let me go ahead and get back to the stream and we'll talk about it a little bit more as things go on, guys. Okay. All right. So one of the other questions that I got is, what leak detector do I use? And I keep getting that in all my different videos. Okay. I use the DTEC Select leak detector. I found it to be a great leak detector. I've always used it for a very long time. Actually, I've probably used that thing for close to 10 years. Okay. I've probably replaced it 3 or 4 times over those 10 years. And one of the cool things about the DTEC Select is that the leak detector itself usually doesn't go bad. You just have to buy the new little sensor for it. And then sometimes buy new batteries for it, and then the little filters for the end. So I've always been a fan of the DTEC Select. I've heard some people say they don't like it. Okay. So to each their own, but for me, it's always worked really well. So, all right. I see that there's a conversation going in here, and I see that Ralph is answering a question about R448A and POE oil. I want to get some context to that question. I see that Jonathan had asked it, so I'm going to go up in here. Okay, Jonathan, okay, 448 has polyester oil. If I do swap for R22, I tend to keep the oils in mind, but those do work well. Okay, so let me get to the other part of that question here. Definitely want to, let me read this right here. Yeah. That was crazy. I would share those if I could, Justin, but yeah, Zach had sent me pictures, guys, of the fire at his house, and it's pretty insane. And Justin just sent me some more pictures. It was pretty crazy. I was talking to Zach about it earlier just through text messages, and I don't even know what to do. I wish I could help more than I can, but you know, it is what it is. But whatever you guys do, again, you know, you can only do what you can safely do as far as financially goes. So don't put yourself out there into a position that you get yourself in trouble. You know, only help with what you can help with. So, all right. I kind of want to get into this, this here thing that I see Ralph talking about. I don't know the right question here, so I'm going to talk about this a little bit and just kind of go off on a wing. So, guys, just so you know, Dallas fan Ralph here works for Honeywell Refrigerants. So if you do have questions about Honeywell Refrigerants, Ralph is the man to ask. And you know what? I always do this. I don't have your email in here, Ralph. I constantly do this. Everybody always asks for your email, and I always forget to put it in there. Okay, so R448A refrigerant. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about this a little bit. R448A is the refrigerant that we have chosen to start using as an R404A replacement. For those of you that are not in California, you guys have an upcoming change with all the different refrigerants. I can't think of what the change is called, but here in California, we adopted this change ahead of time. So this July 1st of this past year, or this year right now, July 1st, it became illegal to use R404A in refrigeration systems basically in restaurants, supermarkets. I think supermarkets were already around, but it basically became illegal to use R404A in system changeouts, system upgrades pretty much. Okay, you can do leak repairs essentially, but if you have to change a compressor, if you have to change an evaporator, you have to change a condensing unit, you got to change the gas over technically. Okay, so we kind of have been adopting this a little bit more. So I would say that I've got probably 8 or 9 systems out there, walk-in coolers and different coolers and freezers that we have changed over to R448A. And when I say changed over, we did new system installs. So new evaporator, new condenser, new line sets. Just kind of want to share my experiences. I really haven't had a bad experience at all. Okay. The systems were sized accordingly. I will say that in a perfect world, if you can, you typically, especially when you're dealing with like Heatcraft condensing units, a lot of the manufacturers have special requirements that they want you to do where they'll technically certify their equipment to be worked with 448A, okay? So for instance, Heatcraft. What Heatcraft wants you to do if you're gonna size your equipment, they typically want you to go up one size. So basically, if your heat load calculations requires a 3-ton, then Heatcraft kind of recommends that you go to a 3.5-ton, okay? Tecumseh kind of recommends the same thing. It just depends. You have to do the calculations. You have to basically do your load calculation, and then they just have to do some math essentially to find out if it can handle it. But I've also used 448A on systems that technically weren't designed for 448A. So I had a condensing unit that was scoped to be for 404, but it took forever for them to send it to us. I put 448A in there. Obviously, we put the right TXV, the right orifice in the distributor, or I mean the right nozzle, I should say. And everything's working fine. Okay, I haven't had a single problem with 448A. Most of your typical digital pressure charts are already going to account for the glide in the refrigerant. It does have a high glide, but other than that, there's really not much you guys need to worry about. The only time that the glide is really going to confuse you guys is when you're just looking at a paper chart and looking at the temperature pressures, because that, most of the time if you use your digital gauges or if you use a smart evaporator, it's already going to account for the glide and it's going to give you the midpoint. I'd love to do a video on that, but I'm not confident enough to be able to talk completely about the glide and the proper ways, but I am kind of working on something where we can address refrigerant glide, and I'll work on something like that. Okay. But as far as 448A goes, I haven't had a single problem with it. It's been working great for me. I will say that there is talk that, and even Honeywell Refrigerants, and Ralph will tell you too, that if you're going to be working it on low temp, then you need to have some kind of cooling coming back to that compressor, such as a liquid injection to cool the head of the compressor, something like that, okay? Which is pretty typical even for 404, especially when you're using scroll compressors, okay? But most of the 404A scroll compressors out there already have liquid injection. But other than that, guys, there's nothing to be afraid of, okay? It's just another refrigerant. It's really not a big deal. You just weigh the charge in. So if you're working on a Heatcraft condensing unit, it has a head pressure control valve, so we have to put a certain amount of gas in that system. So it's not just a matter of clearing the sight glass. We have to calculate for the winter charge. We just weigh in the charge usually from the beginning. We mark the receiver so that way we know where the level should be. If we ever have a leak, we fill it up to that level again and we move on, okay? So really haven't had any problems. So I wouldn't be so afraid of these alternative refrigerants, okay? But where you do want to be careful in is using like 448A in a system. It does have to have polyester oil, okay? And you want to be cautious about the expansion valves. If you're going to use it on a 404A expansion valve, it will still work, but you will have to make adjustments, okay? Typically, the 448A has very similar operating characteristics of R22, so it runs at a very low head pressure compared to 404A. And if you do a new install, you're actually going to use an R22 valve. It's going to use an R22 power head. And the nozzle is just going to be a little different. But even, you don't necessarily have to change the nozzle every single time. If you're doing a retrofit, you can get away with using the 404A nozzles too. You can just make some adjustments to the expansion valves. Sporlan has some great information on R448A. If you just Google search R448A and Sporlan, or you can go to Honeywell Refrigerants website, and they have a lot of great information there too. So, all right. I want to try to address some questions in the chat. So let's, if you guys have put questions and I haven't addressed them yet, do me a favor and put them again. Let's try to put your questions in caps lock. Joe65, can you clean your own AC unit or should you call a tech? that's kind of a double-edged sword. If you're a competent person, then I think you can clean your own unit, but you need to be very careful and understand the risks of cleaning your own unit. First off, it's an electrical device. If you get the wrong component wet, you can get electrocuted. So de-energizing the disconnect switch at your unit isn't necessarily going to de-energize that unit, because there's a 24 volt transformer. Typically, if this is a split system, there's a 24 volt transformer sending power to your contactor coil that does not get de-energized by the disconnect switch outside. So while 24 volts probably wouldn't kill you if you got shocked by it, you can short out a transformer too if you get the wrong components wet still. I'd be very cautious about, hey, Justin, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. Definitely. I'll talk about it in a minute. But could you clean your own unit, Joe 65? Sure, you could. Okay, I'm sure you can find a video on how to do it properly, or you can read some information on the internet. Would it be better to call a technician? Yeah, because if you called a competent technician, he would more than likely evaluate other things about your system and let you know if everything is operating properly. But is this something you can do? Yes, it is. Okay, it definitely is if you do it safely. De-energize the unit inside, de-energize the unit outside. Make sure you don't get any of the electrical components wet. I can't tell you how to do it. The proper way to clean your unit, though, would be to disassemble it and clean it from the inside out. But I'm not going to go any further with explaining to you how to do that, because there's some components such as capacitors and different things that could still be energized even when you de-energize the circuit. So you do want to be careful, and you can still get hurt. Okay, so okay, let's keep going. Okay, Justin Adams had asked me a question: zip ties or duct tape, pros and cons of each. Now, Justin, to get some context to your, there you go. Okay, I'm gonna. Hang on just a sec. I'll type that in. Hey, Justin, the moderator, Justin, can you link Ralph's email in here? I'm pretty sure you can. It's Ralph. He's got it in there. You just gotta, no, for whatever reason, I have it turned off to where he can. I don't know if you can handle that or not. I don't know if you're driving, Justin. You had said you were driving. So if you can't do it, you can't do it, man. It's all good. Okay. So Justin Adams, zip ties or duct tape. So do you mean, as far as ductwork goes? I'm assuming that's what you mean by that. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about that too. There's many other guys. Actually, Adam is in here. A-Team Adam does residential and ductwork and stuff. And guys, Adam's also got... Where's your name at? I know I just saw it in here, Adam. I'm having a hard time looking at this chat right now. I'll link it in here. Gosh darn it. I just saw your chat in here, Adam. Where did it go? All of a sudden, I can't see your name. Anyways, A-Team Adam's on here. He's got some great ductwork series that he's been working on right now, and I watched it yesterday, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so as far as... Oh, there you are right there. Duh. For some reason, I couldn't find your name. So A-Team Adam's in here. If you click on at the end of his... there's 3 dots at the end of his chat right there, and you can go to his channel, and he's got some great information. You guys subscribe to his channel because he's doing a ductwork series that'll be really cool. But anyways, Justin Adams... If you're talking about ductwork, zip ties are good. I'm not an expert with ductwork, but if I'm going to do ductwork, I'm going to use duct sealer. I'm going to use zip ties or panduit straps. And then I will even use some tape to secure the jacket of the insulated duct, the insulation jacket. And then I'll even do a panduit strap around that too. But typically, duct tape over the years is going to come off unless you use some kind of duct sealer or something like that to properly fasten it. So just using duct tape on ductwork in the attic is not going to fly because it's going to back itself off over the years. So panduit straps and duct sealer are what you're going to want to use to properly seal that. But there's many other guys that handle ductwork installation and do videos on that stuff. I'm more of a refrigeration guy, so I just know a little bit about that. All right. Sorry, guys. I am really bouncing around with these questions right now. I'm going to try to get to. Okay, so Reefer Tech Mark, do I ever come across inverter units with the restaurant stuff? What do you mean by inverter units? Okay, like as in VRF systems? Not really. Not really. We do have like high-tech train units that have variable speed compressors. We come across that, and we have VFD drives on blower units and condenser fan motors and blower motors and different stuff like that, exhaust fans. But as far as like VRF, variable refrigerant flow, not so much. I really don't come across that in the restaurant stuff. So, All right. Oh, yeah, definitely. Ralph Halili, you said, can I explain more on how I identified that the solenoid valve was leaking by using the 2 pipe clamps on my previous video? And yes, I can. So I had a video, guys, that I released where I had a walk-in freezer. The complaint was, well, first off, you have to use everything that's going on. My original complaint from the customer was that the walk-in freezer was getting too cold. I had previously sent another tech out there, and he goes, dude, everything's working fine. I can't find a single thing wrong with the box. It was not too cold. Everything was cool. So I told the customer, just keep an eye on it and let us know if it happens again. So they called me again, and I asked them to pay a little more attention and let me know some more details, like what time does this happen, etc. So the next morning they called me and they said, okay, we came in at 7 a.m. and my walk-in was at 32 degrees or 28 degrees or something like that. And they had a bunch of frozen product in there, and this was a walk-in cooler. So anyways, I went out that day, and luckily when I went out there, it was doing the same thing. I arrived and I think it was at 32 degrees or something like that when I walked into the restaurant. Okay. I checked some vital signs right away because I was already suspect of the solenoid valve. So I immediately went to my thermostat and I verified that my thermostat was not calling. Okay. And then what I did was I used my pipe clamp temperature, my field piece job link pipe clamps, right? That synced with my manifold. And I put one on each side of the liquid line solenoid valve. Okay. And what I found was that one side of the solenoid valve was warmer, one side was colder. Okay. Now that wasn't the only thing though. To me, there was a temperature drop like it was metering refrigerant. It was starting to get cold coming out of one side of the solenoid valve. But then what I did, and I did not de-energize anything. Okay. I left everything running. I was trying to very carefully diagnose because I didn't want to correct the problem before I figured out what was going on. So the next thing I did was I went over and put my service gauge on the low side or the superheat port in the evaporator. And I noticed that I had frost coming out of my expansion valve, but the system should have been pumped down because the liquid line solenoid valve should have been turned off by the thermostat. Okay. So we knew the thermostat wasn't the problem. So I was really suspect of the liquid line solenoid valve. And basically I put my service gauge on there and I had about 6 PSI. And then I went onto the roof, and this part I know I didn't show in the video, which probably would have given some clarification, but my condensing unit was still running and it wasn't shutting off. The low pressure control was cutting out about 4 PSI. So it was sitting at about 6 PSI and it was running just ever so, just a little bit. And it was causing the system to just run and just bring the temp down below the thermostat set point. So by looking at all that stuff, I was able to diagnose that I had a liquid line solenoid valve that was leaking by. Now, what caused the liquid line solenoid valve to leak by is hard to say. More than likely, something was stuck inside the solenoid valve. But what was interesting in that is that I installed that system probably 10 years ago and really haven't had any problems with it. I don't even know if we've really done any refrigeration repairs on it. But something was floating around in the system more than likely, and it got stuck in that solenoid valve. And I did also address the fact that when you're installing solenoid valves, liquid line solenoid valves, you need to make sure that you have the right size solenoid valve because it's very easy to put an undersized valve and or an oversized valve, and those could cause other issues. Okay, so you got to size a liquid line solenoid valve via the tonnage of the system and how much refrigerant is going to be flowing through it. So hopefully that answers your question, Ralph. All right. Let's see. Let me see what else I got going on here. Let's see if it gets any of these other questions here, guys. Okay, so I see Fly Eagles Fly Bleed Green. You said, and for those that use ductboard for duct work, still seal the connections, seam and collar holes to prevent fiberglass from becoming airborne. That's a big thing with ductboard, right? I don't work with ductboard very much, but I've always been told that you get little pieces of fiberglass flying around and different stuff. So definitely important to seal everything up properly. So, okay. David Lara says it's hot as balls in California and he needs a TX. Yeah, that's funny. Thanks, bud. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it has been a crazy heat wave. You know what's weird is we had that heat wave last week where it was 100 and some change, and then this week it's like 85. It like cooled down, and I got my windows open again. It's super cool. All right. David Lara, industrial HVAC or commercial? As in, are you asking which one? It's hard to say, man. I mean, you can definitely keep climbing the ladder to industrial. Industrial is definitely one step above commercial. When you get into industrial, you might get into like ammonia systems and stuff, and there's definitely some money in that. You know, is that what you want to do? Yeah, I don't want to say not to do it, because I know some people that do that and they love it. So whatever you're interested in, you're definitely going to work on bigger stuff, bigger systems. You're probably going to be getting into ammonia when you go into industrial. So I say go for it if you want the challenge. All right. And let's see. Okay, so I don't see any more questions here, guys. So if let's put some more questions in here. If you guys have what is this? Director's peers. Hold on one second. What is this? Oh, okay, gotcha. I see what that is. I was confused by that link, but okay. I've got some more questions here that I want to answer. So let's put this in here. So this was a really good one, guys. Someone had asked me, let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. Okay, so someone had asked me about unsweating a compressor. And this was a really good topic. So it was a gentleman, and he said he just got out of a training class with some technical trainer. I didn't recognize the name, but the way that he said it, I was assuming it was some revered technical trainer guy. Not saying anything bad about the trainer, okay? I just don't happen to know who the person was. But he said he just got out of a technical training with this person, and he was the trainer was adamant that you never unsweat a compressor fitting and that you should always cut a compressor fitting. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I am going to say sometimes it's not practical to cut out components. When at all possible, sure, it's always a good idea to cut out a compressor, any kind of fitting, right? Because especially nowadays that we have these alternative refrigerants that contain flammable components, there's the potential that even though you recovered the system, that there might still be a little bit of a flammable component in that compressor oil boiling off, right? Because each refrigerant has a different boiling point, which is why we have something called a glide, right? And so you could recover one refrigerant and you might still have some vapor from another one, or one refrigerant might be recovered first and then leave over, different. So it's very important that you understand that, okay? And I was just explaining to the guy that's working with me right now that we were working on some brazing today at the shop, and we were talking about that, and I was explaining to him because I was teaching him how to unsweat a fitting from a compressor, because sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's a pre-manufactured piece if you're working on a small package unit, and if you cut that fitting, it's going to be a pain in the butt to make that weird 45 on that 7/8 inch line, right? Because it's a pre-bent fitting. And you just got to do what you got to do. But I highly suggest that you consider your environment. Okay. If you're in a situation where, slag might drip off of your braze joint and catch something on fire, then yeah, I would highly suggest that you might want to cut the fitting before and pull the compressor out that way. But sometimes you can't do that. Okay. Sometimes you just have to evaluate where you're at and know, okay, I'm going to put down some wet towels so that slag drips on that. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. Be prepared for a flame out is what might happen if you unsweat a fitting. Okay. Be prepared for it. Make sure, what you could do to try to prevent a flame out is you could purge the system with nitrogen before, sweep it really good. And make sure that there's no vapor. Shake the compressor to kind of disturb the refrigerant that's stuck in the oil and let it boil off. Okay. And then unsweat. But even as you're unsweating, be prepared that when that compressor fitting comes out, there might be a little flame that comes out of there. Okay. So if there's anything flammable around you, you want to be cautious about that and be ready for it. Always have a fire extinguisher, a water hose, but you got to be careful too with a water hose or a spray bottle, because if the oil ignites, right, water's necessarily not going to be the greatest thing to put that fire out with, right? So you want to have the proper protective equipment, essentially a fire extinguisher that can put out an oil fire, different things like that. Okay. We say that it's really not if people do their jobs right, it's really not that big of a deal, but it's definitely something that you want to consider. Okay. The systems that I work on, for the most part, I'm the only technician and we're the only service company that works on them. So I know they don't have any of these weird alternative refrigerants. Okay. Where you really want to be cautious with was a while back, we had this company that came out, right? I think you guys have heard the stories, and they were basically selling pure propane to R22 customers, saying it would work fine. And while it does work, we have a problem, because the next guy that goes to unsweat that compressor doesn't know that they had propane in there, and that propane's still in the oil, and you go to light that and you get a pretty good flame coming out that compressor. So that's when you really want to be cautious. Okay. And it's something we got to think about a little bit more these days as we run into more of these alternative refrigerants that do have flammable components to them. You want to be cautious and make sure that you're following all the proper refrigeration practices when you're lighting a torch, when you're doing anything. Okay. All right. Let me look at this. Does R290 boil out of the compressor oil as much as other refrigerants? Yeah, it does. So I have a video, Reefer Tech Mark, where I think I only have like one video with R290, right? And I'm changing a compressor. And I went ahead and showed you guys. I purged the system with nitrogen. The system was completely flat and the compressor was taken out of the system. There was no compressor. The compressor was completely unhooked. And I had to unsweat the dryer due to the situation. So I had cut the compressor out because I could, but I had to unsweat the dryer. And I went to go unsweat the dryer, right? And I had the solenoid valves open and everything. And there was still vapor inside that system. And when I waved my torch across the open line, it ignited. So, and the compressor wasn't even in the picture. And the vapor that was still stuck in that system ignited. So you do have to be cautious, especially when you're dealing with R290 or R600. Those are the ones that you want to make sure that you're purging the system. You're agitating the compressor while nitrogen's flowing through it. You're cutting as many components as possible out. And keep it in mind when you're working with systems that might have alternative refrigerants too, because you never know. I mean, if you're working on a brand new system or you know other people have had their fingers in there, you don't know what they put in there. So yes, you got to be very, very cautious. So let's see what else. Am I changing the TXV on the walk-in freezer from this morning's video? Rafael Gomez. Honestly, I haven't even gotten to that one yet. I defrosted that system and we haven't had to go back out since, but it is on my list. I just haven't had a chance to get out there. So yes, I am more than likely going to have to change a TXV. That was just my assumption as to what was the problem on that walk-in freezer, but we're going to go out and do a proper evaluation. So I haven't even changed that low pressure control yet either. That thing's still running. So yes, I will get to it. It's just one of the things I haven't gotten to yet. I've been busy lately. It's been hard. So Jacob Cyphers, I think that's how you pronounce your name. Have I noticed quality issues with the White Rogers walk-in stats? Jacob, I'm going to be honest with you, dude. I wouldn't trust a White Rogers stat just because I'm not comfortable or familiar with them. I don't want to knock them. Some people may love them. But my go-to thermostats for a system is a Johnson Penn or Penn Johnson, or these days the Key to Therm digital thermostats. Any of the mechanical ones, I'm trying to get away from mechanical stats in general. But if I do have to choose a mechanical, I'm going to use like an A19 Johnson Penn mechanical stat. I don't like my preference. I don't like the Emerson ones or these weird White Rogers ones. I'm just not a fan of them because I'm not comfortable. I don't use them very much. So. Do you need special tools for R290 equipment? Yes, you do. Yeah, you need some special tools, and you also need to follow a few extra steps when you're properly working on a system. So definitely something you want to do and research. What I would highly suggest you do is Google search True Manufacturing, Google search Delafield Manufacturing. Both of them are refrigerator manufacturers that are producing a lot of R290 equipment right now. They all have training videos on their website. If you are a member of RSES, I would highly suggest RSES has a hydrocarbon training class. It's a webinar and series of videos, very, very good information, and it's going to tell you the proper practices for working with R290. The biggest issue with R290 is you have to remember stuff is flammable. Number one thing that's going to throw everybody for a loop is R290 is completely legal to vent into the atmosphere. You can let it go into the atmosphere. You do not recover it, okay? You especially do not use a standard recovery machine. Now, if you're in a sensitive environment where you can't release it into the atmosphere, such as like a hospital or something like that, there is recovery methods, but you're going to have to do some research because it's not a typical recovery machine, okay? They have special like filter systems that basically pull the flammable components and different things out, okay? You typically won't find service fittings, so you'll have to add service fittings to R290 systems. You have to use a special leak detector for R290. It's a combustible gas leak detector. And when you're all done, if you follow the rules, okay, not everybody does, but if you follow the rules, there's not supposed to be service fittings left on that system when you're done either. So you're supposed to cut those fittings off, seal them up, whether you braze them or use a mechanical fitting, and leave the system without fittings when you leave. Now, that's a questionable thing, but yes, R290 is different and it does require different tools. Okay. What is the worst refrigerated gas? I really can't say which one's the worst, dude. I mean, they're all just a refrigerant. Bear Downs. Yeah, up until recently, I was a really big fan of the Ronco ETC 111000, and it still is one of my favorite stats. The only thing it's missing is defrost. If it had defrost, it'd still be a really cool stat. But, you know, it doesn't until they release defrost in them. But the Ronco ETC 111,000, and my favorite is the 141,000, because the 141,000 is multi-volt and it's a NEMA 4 enclosure. So it's technically water resistant. So it works best in walk-in freezers and different things. So, all right. Okay. So I see someone talking about Ralph from Honeywell saying that R290 refrigerant comes in 16-ounce cans. Yeah, R290 is typically sold in small canisters, okay? And the reason why they do that is mainly is because of shipping reasons, is the way that I've been told, because it's hard for them to ship 30-pound drums of it, but it's also unsafe to carry a 30-pound drum. Someone had also asked me in my email questions today whether or not I keep the R290 in my trucks, and I'm assuming they were asking me because it gets hot in the summertime. And yeah, I do keep R290 in my truck. I keep 1 to 2 cans typically. But, you know, as the crazy summer days come and we hit 120 like we did last summer, you know, it's probably getting, when my van is stopped and sitting in the sun, it's probably 140, 150 in my truck. That's probably something we need to think about, is keeping a canister of R290 in there, because that sounds a little unsafe, right? So that's something we need to take into consideration when we're working with these flammable refrigerants, is where we're storing them and how hot it's getting in our trucks. So when he asked me that question, it was kind of like I had to do a double take. Like, wait, why wouldn't I? You know, why? Oh, yeah, I really thought about it. Maybe I shouldn't be keeping those in my truck, you know, especially when we get these crazy, crazy hot days in the summer. It's something to think about. So, all right. Let's see. Can I please explain how you bypass the reversing valve on the air conditioner? The Tito209 asked me. So I had done a video, or I had actually done a Facebook post saying I can hack with the rest of them. So what happened, and I didn't make a video out of this, but what happened was I had a customer that called us and they said their heat pump wasn't working. We have a few heat pumps here in California. It was a little residential system. We don't do residential work per se, but it's for a storage facility. Anyways. So they called us, said their AC unit wasn't working. I wasn't the tech that went out. One of our other techs went out there and he called me and said, hey, dude, this thing's flat. And what had happened was one of the pressure equalization lines on the reversing valve had cracked, which is a common thing that happens. And it leaked out all the R22 refrigerant. This was a very old system. So we quoted them a repair and we gave them a very, very strong nudge and said, hey, you really should consider replacing this system, because the repair was stupid expensive for like 6 pounds of 22, a new reversing valve, a bunch of labor, because it was a pain in the butt to change the reversing valve, as we all know, right? And they decided to go ahead and replace the package unit. Okay, so we quoted them. They said yes. We ordered the package unit, and it was going to take like 2 weeks to get it. And no, it was going to take a week. And so we waited the week, right? They were doing okay. This was before the heat wave, but then the heat wave hit, and they were dying. And so we got the package unit finally, the replacement one, and it was damaged. And we're like, for real, okay? Because we were trying to order the direct replacement. It was an older package unit. So anyway, so it was damaged. So I was like, well, we got to go with a different unit, but we're going to need some duct work to make it work. So I had to go over there and get the unit going temporarily. So what I did, the system was completely flat, was I completely cut the reversing valve out of the picture. If you understand how a reversing valve works, it just reverses the flow of refrigerant from the discharge line and the suction line. Okay, so the discharge line normally basically goes to your condenser, right? Well, with the reversing valve, we can choose to send it the opposite direction to reverse the flow of refrigerant. So what I did was I cut the reversing valve out and I put in a 90 and made the suction go directly to the suction and made the discharge go directly to the condenser, and it was no longer a heat pump anymore. Okay, it was just a straight cool unit. So then I just pulled a vacuum on the unit, and because we were changing the unit, I didn't even change a dryer. I pulled a vacuum and put some refrigerant in it. I didn't use R22 refrigerant. I used one of these drop-ins that we had at the shop, which I'm not a fan of, but I did it for a temporary replacement. I used R427A just because I had a drum and put it in there temporarily, and it got them through. Okay, so we did that, and it got them by, you know. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do to help the customer out. So yeah, R22 is getting expensive, but I'm still using R22 as of this day right now. I still will buy a drum and use it when I have to. So you know, until we can't anymore. Most of my customers, I give them the option. I say, hey, we can go with some of these alternative refrigerants, but here's the deal. We need to change the oil. We need to follow these steps. We might have to change a TXV. We might have to do this. And usually they choose to not go that path, and they just want us to use R22. I am not a fan of winging it and throwing in one of these refrigerants that they say will work with mineral oil, okay? Because in my experience, typically, any of these alternative refrigerants for R22 typically need polyester oil. Okay. They do add, other gases. Basically, they'll add a flammable component. They'll either add like isobutane usually or something like that to the system to try to, or R32 or whatever, to try to make them be a little bit more compatible with the mineral oils. From my experience, this is just my little bit of research that I've done, but they typically work best if they have polyester oil. So my choice is that if I'm going to use an alternative refrigerant, I am going to use it with polyester oil. So to do the repair, the customer is going to be given a quote to change the oil in the compressor and evaluate the system after we put the refrigerant in, whether or not we need to change the expansion valve or adjust it or whatever we need to do. So that's just my method of doing it, guys. Not saying you guys are wrong for doing it your way. That's just my way, because as a business owner, I'm selling this customer on this repair and I want to make sure this repair is going to work. So for me to feel comfortable with the repair, I'm going to change the oil if I'm going to use an alternative refrigerant to R22. All right. Let me go in here. So, okay, W Wolf 771177. You said True Blue evacuation hoses. If you pull a vacuum too quick, doesn't it freeze? So there's a lot of controversy about pulling a vacuum too quick. I am not the smartest person in the world, okay? I'll put that out there right now. I hear a lot of information and I tend to absorb it and I can repeat a lot of it, okay? I too thought the same thing, that if you pulled the vacuum too quick, because I was always taught, if you pulled the vacuum too quick, it would cause problems. But we've been told over the years, and our way of thought has been changing and shifting, okay? And from my understanding, it's pretty much impossible to freeze moisture in a system as big as what we're working on, okay? Especially with the warm air that's going across it. There's a lot of other people that have great information to say about it. I believe even Jim Bergman has a video about it too, where he talks about how hard it is to actually freeze moisture. Now, I know that we've all seen the experiment where you take a mason jar, you put a little bit of water in it, and you put a vacuum hose and you JB weld the top and you turn it on and it starts to boil and freeze and all that stuff, okay? But that's a pretty interesting, almost a controlled environment, right? But our systems are a lot bigger and it's really hard to basically freeze that moisture that's in the system, okay? But on top of that, your liquid dryer should be capturing that moisture too, okay? So it's kind of been, debunked or whatever, if you want to say, that you're going to freeze the moisture in the system using True Blue, okay? But again, we should lean on some other people that know a little bit more about that. I feel comfortable using True Blue. It definitely helps me. I've never had any problems. Even when I was using my Appion kit, never had any problems. I will say that the science that we've been using with vacuums and the understanding that we have with an evacuation on a system, we need to change our methods of thought, guys. Even for many years, I evacuated through my manifold, and it's not the best thing to do in the world. We've kind of realized, okay? And we've realized that the micron gauge that comes in your manifold is not that accurate when it compares to the micron gauge that might be somewhere else in the system, okay? You typically want to put your micron gauge downwind from your pump, farthest away in the systems if you can, okay? So put it on your liquid line, pull through your suction line, something like that, so that way you're pulling all the way through the system. And it's also been proven too, and I believe Jim Bergman's done some videos about it, someone has, where they show like how different and how inaccurate the gauge in your manifold can be compared to an actual standalone micron gauge somewhere on the system, and how much of a difference you can get. Okay, so you want to do some evaluation on that, and we need to start changing the way that we think about that. I'm not saying that I never pull a vacuum through my manifold. In fact, in the video where I diagnosed the solenoid valve, I talked about pulling a vacuum through my manifold. I am going to address something too, something that we need to think about when we're working on a system that's pumped down, whether it be an air conditioner or whether it be thank you very much. I just saw a super chat come in. Just Russ. Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. So, I saw, or I had pulled I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But when we're working on a system that's pumped down, it's also very hard, especially depending on what side of the system your low side is on, right? If I'm working on a refrigeration system that's pumped down at the liquid line receiver, I'm pulling on the oil in that compressor, essentially, okay, when I'm pulling on the low side. And it's going to be really hard to attain a perfect vacuum on a system that's pumped down. It's going to be very hard. And then also too, because you're pulling against the king valve on the receiver, and that king valve will leak, okay? So I'll talk about that some more in some videos. So, All right, I want to get to some more questions in here. I see a lot of information going through in the chat, and I hope I'm not missing too much. The Tito 209, what's the best micron gauge? Hey man, to each their own. I like the Blue Vac by AccuTools. I really like that one. I like the Blue Vac Pro. That's what I have. I'm not saying you guys have to buy that. It's just the one that I choose to use. They also have the Blue Vac Micro. They're all Bluetooth now if you buy any of the new ones, and they work with the app. Very, very good. Excuse me. All right, so let's get to some more questions, guys. What am I missing? Throw some stuff in here. I'll try to get to it. Okay. And Jonathan Lopez, I still use my field piece for a couple things. If I'm working on a small reach-in where it's inconvenient to put the big giant vacuum hoses and stuff, I'll do that. But you'll hear that probably the most popular vacuum gauge out there right now is probably the Blue Vac, and you'll see a lot of people saying that too. So, all right. What are you laughing about, Superior? What did I say? All right. I don't know what I'm missing in here, guys. So I use the Hoblo 3000. Is that what you're laughing about? That's funny. David Lara, that's funny, dude. All right. Okay, guys. If I'm missing, what vacuum pump do I use? I use the Field Piece VP85. But full disclosure, Field Piece sent me that for free as in exchange for taking some photos with them because of a beta test thing that I was doing. So I did not buy that vacuum pump, but I would buy it if I had to buy another one. It was bitchin'. So, and I love it. And before that, I was using the JB 8CFM, I think JB, I don't know what it's called. They're just the standard JB pump, and it worked for me forever. All my guys have the JB pumps in their trucks, so they work great. They're just heavy. I really dig the Field Piece VP85 though, and I'll probably be buying those for my guys as we need them. The oil change on the fly on the VP85 is badass. So, how do I determine if a cap tube system is partially clogged? So on a cap tube system, okay, so how do I explain this? So obviously you want to pay attention to your refrigeration pressures, right? And you're going to look at your superheat on a cap tube system, okay? But what you're going to tend to notice, especially on an R134A system, is you're going to tend to notice a lower than normal suction pressure, okay? Sometimes pulling into a vacuum. And you're going to notice that you have a head pressure that really doesn't climb too much, and it's just going to kind of sit there stagnant, okay? But then what you can do is you can also, it's pretty safe to say that if you have a 134A system with polyester oil in it and it's not maintained properly, it's probably going to have a plugged up capillary tube. We don't run into that too much anymore, but it was something to do with the 134A refrigerant and the polyester oil. We used to run into plugged cap tubes all the time, and it was just a mess, okay? And one thing I'm going to tell you guys too is the manufacturers, they typically won't tell you to diagnose via superheat or subcooling when you're working on their systems, whether it be a TXV or a cap tube. And so that's why I don't really tell you to look at the superheat too much, because the manufacturers are just going to basically tell you to use pressures, okay? So what the manufacturer is going to tell you to do if you're working on a true reach, and they're going to say add about 2 ounces of gas, tell me if your head pressure rises. If your head pressure doesn't rise and you still have a low suction pressure, it's pulling into a vacuum, the manufacturer is going to tell you, yeah, you probably got a plugged up cap tube. That's going to be a pretty common thing that they're going to say. And you know, I'd love to go by superheat and subcooling, but I mean, they're the ones giving you the tech advice, so it tends to work fine. All right. I know this might be a stupid question, but had you ever used JB Weld on your job to fix leaks? No, I haven't, Mr. Johnny Boy. I've heard of people using different epoxies and different things. Oh, no. I take that back. I've used an epoxy, not JB Weld. I've used an epoxy to fix an ice machine one time where the little plastic thing broke off, but I've never fixed a refrigeration leak with any of those epoxies. I do know that originally one of the Heatcraft, actually, if you look at Heatcraft's technical manual and their microchannel condensers, they tell you to use an epoxy to fix condenser leaks on them, which is kind of silly because you can braze those things now, or you can solder those things with some of the solder weld, aluminum solder, but yeah, it's a whole thing. All right. Let's see what else. How do you go about managing your day-to-day installs or repairs, including any emergency callouts? Is it you by yourself, or do you have a crew of... yeah, so I have other people that work for me. It's funny you bring that up, Josh, because we had a thing today. where I was doing the install on that. I was actually replacing the package unit today that I was talking about, where I changed the reversing, or I bypassed the reversing valve. So my morning started with a crane lift. I was changing a little 3-ton package unit. I'm not doing a video on it, but it was just a whole thing. And right in the middle of the 3-ton package unit, we had another tech at a service call, and we had a bad compressor. I was going to go give him a hand, but I couldn't because I had to do some sheet metal work. And I will never do videos on my sheet metal work, Adam, because I can't touch what you're doing, bud. I'm hacking my sheet metal work. So I'd love some of Adam's skills. But anyway, so it happens every day that stuff changes. You gotta change your plan, especially when you're dealing with emergencies and all kinds of stuff. It's a difficult thing. Do I have the one-stop answer on how to handle that stuff? No, I don't. It's very difficult, but you just got to kind of adjust it. But I do have other people working with me, and we send different guys to do different stuff. And as a service company too, I want you guys to know, and as service techs, you guys should understand this too. I realize that not everybody is strong in every single aspect of this field, even people that work for me. There's people that are more comfortable on ice machines. There's people that are more comfortable with refrigeration. And we know that as a service company. I'm not saying that every other service company operates that way, but I know that a service tech is more, more comfortable and stronger working on this particular system. So if at all possible, I'm going to send them to those service calls, and someone who's a little more stronger to do, another service call. It just depends. So, all right. What does it mean if the recovery cylinder gets hot while recovering a system? Let's cover that. That's a really interesting question. So, okay, what happens when we take refrigerant and we pump it through a piston? Okay, when you compress refrigerant, it's going to heat up. Okay, same thing happens when you recover refrigerant, because your recovery machine essentially is a compressor. Okay, it's sucking in the refrigerant and it's pushing it out the other side via the heat of compression, right? So when your recovery machine pumps that refrigerant out the outlet port, it's typically going to be hotter than when it comes in the inlet port because of the pistons that are pushing up and down, okay? Friction, heat of compression, whatever you want to call it. So why does your recovery tank get hot? Well, because the head pressure is going up in the system. Think about it that way. Think about your recovery vessel as a condenser, or a receiver, I guess you should call it. But the head pressure is going up in the system, so your recovery cylinder is getting hot, okay? There's some methods you can do to reduce the recovery cylinder from getting hot. The number one method, guys, is to increase the size of hoses that you're using on your recovery equipment, okay? 1/4-inch hoses in general, they suck. They really do. They're horrible for pushing refrigerant through. So if you can take your hoses and put bigger hoses, okay, you can purchase Appion hoses that are 3/8 in diameter, but they still have a 1/4-inch fitting on the end. It surprises a lot of people, but you actually still get more flow, even though it has a 1/4-inch restriction on the connection, but then it goes to a 3/8 hose. You can still get better flow through that. So buy bigger hoses. That's the number one thing. At a minimum, put a bigger hose from the recovery machine to the recovery tank. Now, best case scenario, put a 3/8 hose going from the machine to the tank and a 3/8 hose going from the machine to your manifold if you're using a manifold. The next thing that I do to try to reduce that is also take out Schrader cores. Don't use the Schrader depressors in your gauge fittings. In fact, those Schrader depressors, typically take them out of the system if you're going to be doing recovery, or take them out of your gauge hoses if you're going to be doing recovery, because those Schraders are highly restrictive and they cause your recovery to take a lot longer and they cause the system to run a lot hotter. Take out the Schraders, take out the Schrader depressors, any restriction you can think of, okay? If you can eliminate your gauges from the picture, that's even better, okay? But you have to do a lot of different stuff because obviously you need to still know the pressure in the system. The last thing that I will do, or actually 2 more things that I will do, is I will, number one, instead of hooking up to the liquid port of my recovery cylinder, I will hook up to the vapor port. If you take a recovery cylinder apart, if you guys have time, wrench that top valve off of your recovery cylinder and look at what's inside. Number one, you'll be so surprised with how dirty recovery cylinders are. If you've ever pulled one apart, it'll blow your mind how nasty they are inside. And then we use them to put refrigerant back into the system. That's why it's imperative we use dryers. But anyways, I'm going off on a tangent. When you pull that recovery tank apart, there's a blue and a red valve, okay? On the liquid valve, there's a dip tube that goes to the bottom of your recovery tank, okay? And what that does is if you're going to charge via liquid, it pulls from the bottom of the tank instead of pulling the vapor off the top of the valve. So that's why technically when you're charging with the recovery tank, you don't have to invert the tank, right? If you're charging with a normal refrigerant cylinder, you're supposed to invert the tank so that way you can charge via liquid. We all know that, okay? So, but when you're recovering gas and you're pumping liquid into that recovery cylinder and you're using the liquid port, you're pushing all that liquid through that highly restrictive dip tube. And the dip tube in there is usually about I think it's an 1/8 inch diameter on the inside. ID, I believe. It's really small. It's quarter OD, but it's like 1/8 inch ID. So what I will do is I will hook up to the vapor port, and hopefully I'm not confusing you guys, and I will invert the tank, okay? Because then I'm still pumping liquid, and then I will dip the tank in ice water. And that right there eliminates the need for a subcooler, which a lot of people have made to try to make their recoveries go faster. Most of the time, I have a subcooler that I carry in my van, but I haven't used it in years because I use bigger hoses, I take out the Schraders, I invert my tank, and I connect to the vapor port, and then I put it in ice water. And it will eliminate your recovery time. It'll make it go faster. Even on the 100-degree days, you'll be able to recover 410A. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. Yes, it is. All right, let's see. What am I missing in here, guys? I don't know if I'm missing questions. Throw them in the bottom in here. Really appreciate you guys to give the thing a thumbs up. HVACR North, thank you so very much, man. Okay, so I want to cover something again that I kind of covered because I'm sure there's going to be some new guys in here, okay, that weren't in the beginning of the stream. Our very good friend, Zach Ciota, had an incident at his house last night. Zach Ciota is the one that does the HVAC Shop Talk. He was supposed to do his skilled trade up giveaway game show yesterday, right? He'd been on hiatus because he was redesigning a show. And as he mentioned on his video that he put out on the Shop Talk channel, his entire family, luckily, thank goodness, his entire family was out in his studio, which is a back garage behind his house, and they were just hanging out talking. And his wife went to go inside, went to her car, and noticed there was smoke coming out of the house. And Zach told the story. You guys should go watch the video. His house burnt down yesterday, guys. Not that there's any good day for it to happen, but it happened on Father's Day, okay? They lost pretty much everything. Okay, yes, they have insurance. Yes, they will be okay. You know, they're gonna do everything they got to do. But I would encourage you guys, if any of you can, and I know I said this already in the beginning, but I'm talking to the new people. If any of you can possibly spare $1 or $2, I know Zach is not asking for it, guys. We, as other creators, are taking it upon ourselves to mention this for Zach. Okay, he's honestly embarrassed because he doesn't want to ask for help. He doesn't want help, but we're trying to push it to him because we know that he's going through a hard time right now. You guys understand, he lost everything. They lost their clothes. They lost everything. Think about your house. I mean, they were not ready for this to happen, as if anybody's ready for it to happen. So they lost everything. So yes, they have insurance, and yes, that will cover their house, and I'm sure everything will be okay. But I figure that if anybody here can help out, I'm going to personally send them a check, guys. If any of you guys are interested in sending Zach a check, that is the best way to send him something, okay? The second best way is to donate via PayPal, and I will put the link to his PayPal right now. It's hvacshoptalk@gmail.com. You can go to PayPal, put this in right there, and you can donate whatever you guys feel comfortable with and what you guys can do, okay? If you got, yes, A-Team Adam makes a really good point. If you send money via PayPal, make sure you click friends and family, okay? Because it changes everything. If you don't, it's a whole mess, okay? And it's really hard to explain, but if you're going to donate to Zach via PayPal, click friends and family. Now, if any of you guys can, and if you guys can't, don't worry about it, okay? No pressure. It's all good, okay? I would love to be able to donate thousands and thousands of dollars, but I just can't, okay? But I'm going to give him what I can, and I'm going to send him a personal check just because that's the best way and nobody's going to get a cut of it, basically, okay? If any of you is interested in getting his personal address, email me at hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I will put that in the chat right now. And I will share his address. I'd just rather not share it on the chat right now. But hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I will share his address with you guys. Honestly, that is the best way because then nobody's taking a cut of it. And I'm just going to send him a check, and he can still receive his mail, okay? So I'm not going to harp on this. If you guys can help, great. If not, it's no big deal, okay? He's not asking for this, guys. This is all of us as creators that are coming together to start doing this for him, okay? So he is not asking for this. But I'd appreciate it if you guys could. David Laura, you said, am I NATE certified? Yes, I am NATE certified. I took the test a couple years back. I have the light commercial refrigeration and I have the heat pump, which gives you air conditioning install and all that fancy stuff. So it's something that I chose to do. Does NATE make you a better tech? No. But what NATE does for me is NATE keeps me on my toes because it makes you do continuing education. In order to maintain your NATE certifications, you have to take so much continuing education every year and you have to prove that to them. Okay. Yeah, it is a little frustrating that NATE also makes you pay a fee also every couple years to maintain. That seems kind of silly. It's kind of a money thing, but I still like it because it makes me keep on my toes and keep continuing my education. Tito 209, how do I balance work and family? It's a struggle, bro. I don't know, Tito 209, if you've seen, but I am also going to try to record another episode with my wife. I'm doing a How We Live the HVACR Life series on my channel where we're talking about how I balance this stuff and what we do. So pay attention to my channel. If you guys haven't already seen it, there's already 2 videos up where we talk about a couple different things and some things that we did. The next one we're going to be doing is talking about some struggles that I've had mentally, depression that I went through, anxiety that I deal with, and then some health issues that my wife deals with and how we balance it all out with work and life and everything. So pay attention to my channel and that'll be coming up. All right. Let's see. What am I missing? I don't see anything else in here, guys. Throw some more questions in caps lock. Let me know if you want me to answer anything more. I'm going to look at my sheet right here real quick. Let me see what else. Oh, okay. This is another good question I had. Someone had asked me about, or actually it wasn't someone asked me. So in some of the last couple of videos I've done, you guys have seen some real world skills where I'm having to use brazing and different things, right? You see me put an expansion valve on a reach and freezer. You see me change an expansion valve on a Linux package unit. And a lot of people gave me grief, and I'm gonna own up and tell you guys why I didn't do this. But they gave me grief because I didn't wrap a wet towel around the expansion valve while I was brazing it in, okay? There's some times that you just got to do what you got to do. And on the particular Linux unit, if you've worked on a Linux package unit, you guys have ever seen the expansion valve? It's about that big. It's a tiny little valve, right? And wait, oh snap, what happened there? If you've seen that valve, it's super tiny and it's hard to get a towel around it while you're still trying to braze the fittings. Okay. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You can't take forever on the braze. You got to turn your heat up. You got to get it done fast and you got to move on. Okay. It's not always practical to use wet towels. It's not always practical to use heat compounds. I try to as much as possible. Thermal paste and all this different stuff, right? I'm not a fan of thermal paste because I've gotten to get into a braze joint before and it just turns into a nightmare. But to each their own, I just don't care for the thermal paste. But I have used the wet rag heat compound by Refrigeration Technologies when I can, but sometimes you can't, okay? So it is what it is. But I just want to address that you know, I'm not always perfect, guys. I try to show it in my videos. I do what I got to do, and sometimes you got to take shortcuts. I own up to them. If I ruined a valve, I'd be paying for a valve out of my own pocket. Well, I do, but I mean, you know, you just got to do what you got to do. And sometimes, you know, there's a time and place to follow all the proper procedures and practices in the world, and you have to be able to make the decisions on whether or not you need to follow this particular proper practice. And if you're working on a tiny expansion valve, it might be hard to fit a big old wet towel around it while it's dripping on you while you're trying to do the braze joint. That can be a problem. So what software do I use to edit my films? I use Adobe Premiere Elements on a Windows PC, I will say, and then I use Adobe Audition to handle the audio. So for instance, when I do like the outro and intro to a video, I'll typically record and then I'll work the audio through my microphone that I'm talking on right now, and then I'll use Adobe Audition to record the audio, and then I'll have to sync it into the videos. I use, so Adobe Premiere Elements and Adobe Audition. I tried using Adobe Premiere Pro, but it's just too complicated for me. And you guys have seen my videos. I'm not like a high production quality in my videos. I just kind of like to make them short and simple and get them out there. So if you want to get all technical and make like amazing videos, you can use Adobe Premiere Pro, but it's got a steep learning curve. I have Premiere Pro, but it's just not my cup of tea. All right. What else we got here? Okay, so What else am I missing here? Have I done the standing PT ambient comparison test to make sure no moisture in the system nor mixed refrigerant? No, honestly, Ralph, I've never really found the need to do that test because I typically don't have a lot of systems that have mixed refrigerants. And honestly, I have diagnosed systems with mixed refrigerants and I've just used other things. But that is a method that I would use. I will say, though, if you're going to use the standing test in a system, you need to make sure the evaporator fan motor is running. You need to make sure if we're working on an air conditioning system, right? And so the idea of a standing test is that you're going to bring the evaporator temperature and the condenser temperature to the same exact temperature. So to do that, you need the compressors turned off. If there's solenoid valves, you need all the solenoid valves open. You need the evaporator open to ambient air, not the building air. So you got to take all the panels off, pull ambient air. So if it's 85 degrees outside, you want ambient air coming across the condenser, ambient air coming across the evaporator. And then you want to put your gauges on the system, find your PT chart, find that temperature, the ambient temperature outside. And theoretically, your refrigerant pressure should match, your saturation temperature should match your pressure chart, should match the outdoor air temperature. And that would indicate maybe that you might have contaminants or something in the system. I've never found the need to do that. I've been able to evaluate other ways, basically, okay? Out of curiosity, without thinking too hard about this, I wonder where these high glide refrigerants, where you run into problems with that I think could be a problem when you have a high glide refrigerant. I'm wondering, yeah, I think you might run into a problem. I'll have to think about that one a little bit. So, all right. What am I missing here? Have you seen a trend in plugged microchannel condensers in refrigeration side? Plugged as in restrictions in them or dirty? What's interesting, we had a compressor replacement today on a microchannel, and it was a dirty condenser. The customer wasn't maintaining it, and we had the heat wave last week, and we had an auto reset pressure control, on, off, on, off, on, off, and it grounded out the compressor. But no, personally, I have not seen restricted microchannel condensers, as in plugged up inside. But if I was you, if you have a trend of plugged up microchannel condensers, meaning that there's something restricting the little channels inside, I would assume it's improper refrigeration practices, whether it be on manufacturer's side or whether it be on installation side. Someone's not pulling a proper vacuum, someone's not purging their gauges, and there's contaminants in it. That's what I would think. All right. How do I like 448? Oscar, I have no problems with 448A. I had mentioned it earlier in the stream. Nothing but good things to say about it. It's just another refrigerant, guys. The only thing you have to understand with 448A is it has a high glide. You have to know how to read your temperature pressure chart, find the midpoint, and, charge via a clear sight glass and move on. So, with refrigeration. All right. Adjust your expansion valve too. That's a very important thing. But you can't just drop 448A into a system. You need to make sure it has the proper oil. You need to make sure that the components are sized right. You may need to adjust your expansion valve, etc. No, I don't work on transport refrigeration. Sorry, bud. All right. And Linux package units mainly. No, I really haven't run into that restrictions. No. Okay. Let's see what else. If you were working on a microchannel, the first thing I do is go to the truck and get the dynamite. Yeah. That's a good idea. All right. I got a good question. Why do walk-in coolers have no filters? Oh, that's a good question, Mr. Johnny Boy. So, basically on a reach-in refrigerator, filters, you mean on the condenser or the evaporator? So on the evaporator, well, technically you're not supposed to have the doors open that much, right? But we do see that in some restaurants where people are opening and closing the doors too much, and the walk-ins will get very, very dirty. But another thing to think about as far as filters go is it'd have to be a very special filter because we have high moisture usually in the walk-in coolers and freezers. More moisture than you would typically see in an air conditioning unit. So you might see, if it's a system that's just storing general product, you might see 60, 70% humidity inside that walk-in cooler while it's running. So if you had a box filter that's made out of cardboard, that thing would be saturated with moisture. There is some other things you can do, but a lot of times the walk-in cooler evaporators aren't sized accordingly for a restriction, like an air restriction across it. And then also there'd have to be some funky racks because you can't have the filter rubbing up against the evaporator because the evaporator has a lot of condensation. And it's not like a slab coil like an air conditioner where it's meant to run into a drain pan. I mean, it does have a coil, but it's not meant to have something sucked up against it. So that moisture would wick onto the filter and then drip down into the building too. So it's just one of those things where it's just never really been a need for it. I guess, in some certain situations, someone could find a use to put a filter on a walk-in cooler, but you'd have to really make sure that you're not overloading those evaporator fan motors. Okay, I said I doubt you care because expertise. Tell me at least. In Vitagon, I know that I think you were timed out, but I don't know. But if you're saying something funky, we got to turn it off. I don't know what happened, but I take it whatever you were timed out for, you probably shouldn't do it again, or you'll be eliminated from here. But again, I trust Justin, so whatever Justin chose to do is what it is. So let's see what else. We typically try to keep these streams based on refrigeration and air conditioning. So Ralph Halili, send me an email, bud. I'll talk about that a little bit more. I'll send you some stuff. Okay. Why do people enjoy trolling live streams just to say random stuff? Does it get them? Yeah, I know. I don't know what it is. So, okay, let's see what else. Do I use beer can cold analogy? David Lara. Okay. I'm not going to tell you that I've never used a beer can cold analogy before. There's some truth to beer can cold. Okay. Now, is it the proper way to charge an air conditioning system? No, it's not. Come on. I mean, we know that. But I mean, if you're doing a non-invasive test and you're not putting service gauges on a system and you're very comfortable with the outdoor ambient and you know how cold your suction line should be, then sure, grabbing the suction line and saying, yeah, I think it's working okay. So I mean, have I used beer can cold? Sure, I have. Okay. But I mean, is it the proper way to diagnose the system? Hell no. Okay. Because when you say beer can cold, there's some techs that will simply grab the suction line and say it's not cold enough and keep adding refrigerant. It's not cold enough and keep adding refrigerant. That's not the right way to do it. But if you're using a non-invasive test, you're doing a package unit preventative maintenance on a restaurant with 7 package units, right? They don't have enough time in the maintenance price that they're paying you to go through and put your gauges on everything. I put thermometers and do a delta T across the evaporator. Find out that I have 19 degree TD. Okay, depending on the humidity, your TD is going to change. All right, but if I have a 19, 20 degree TD and I look at the suction lines and they're sweating coming back to the compressor, but they're not frosty, then I might not find the need to put my gauges on that unit. Okay, so have I used the beer can cold method? Sure, I have. Okay, in a certain way. Now, do I charge by doing that? Hell no. Okay. But, as a non-invasive test, sure, I'll grab a suction line and say, yeah, that doesn't quite feel cold enough. Or, because I work on that system a lot and I'm pretty confident with how it should work. So, okay, so working on the 4th, do I work all holidays? I'm going to get to your question, Mr. Johnny Boy. Don't let me forget. I'm going to answer this other one first. Yeah, we're a 24-hour service company and we have to work on whenever the customer calls. Okay. But obviously we're going to charge holiday rates. We do give, our particular company gives 6 holidays a year. So it's a paid holiday. And then we typically have 1 to 2 service techs that are on call on a holiday weekend, depending on how busy we are. So yes, we do work holidays. Whenever the customer's open, we're open. Even if they're not open and they call us, we have to go out there. So that's just the service that we offer working in restaurants. Yeah, Oscar, I'm going to address some high glide refrigerants and how to do things and how to look at pressure charts. Yeah, I will. Okay, so why do we use glycol on glycol units on beer, Mr. Johnny Boy? Okay, great question. So glycol unit, or like a power pack unit, okay, what it's doing, it's basically a miniature chiller, okay? It's a compressor unit with a heat exchanger and an evaporator, or a heat exchanger, and it's basically cooling down glycol and pumping glycol through some lines to do a process. So it's essentially a chiller, right? So what we do in a beer system, like a long draw beer system, so what that means is they typically have a long draw to the kegs. Okay. The kegs are usually in a beer walk-in that might be 200 feet away from the bar. So the lines from those kegs have to pump either through the attic and or through the floor or the ground. A lot of times they're pumped underground through a chase. Well, here in Southern California in the middle of the summer, or anywhere else in the attic or the ground, we usually have a constant temperature, right? And depending on the type of beer you're dispensing, you may typically, for the watery beers, you typically want to have about a 34 degree pour coming out the tap, okay? So your beer, you want it to be about 34 degrees, right? Especially when you're dealing with like Coors Lights and different things like that, because they taste like piss, so it's got to be icy cold, right? So, you get into some of the more flavorful beers like the brown ales and different things like that, and you may want them a little bit warmer. But I'm going off on a tangent talking about piss beers. But we got to keep that beer cold. So if we're pumping it through the cold ground or a hot attic, we've got to keep it cold. So what we do is we take that glycol that's being pumped, right? And it goes into a polypropylene line and it wraps around all the beer lines. And it essentially keeps the beer lines cold from the walk-in that's at 34 degrees to the taps. So it takes glycol and it usually cools it down to about 28 degrees and it wraps around the beer lines to help reduce the heat that those beer lines are absorbing as it's going through the attic or the ground. So that's why we use a glycol line. Okay. So it's basically just to keep the lines cold from point A to point B. There's an alternative. If you have a beer walk-in and, you've got a long draw beer system, what you can do is you can just pour 6 pitchers of beer and then eventually it'll get cold. But the customer don't want to do that, right? Because they just wasted 6 pitchers of beer, pouring them down the drain until they got cold beer coming out the lines. Because eventually you're going to push cold beer through the lines, right? Because the walk-in, eventually you're going to be pouring so much beer that it's going to be coming from the walk-in cold, right? But you get what I'm saying. I mean, they don't want to waste beer, okay? And if you guys don't already know, beer is like the #1 marked up thing in the restaurant. If you guys, beer, they pay almost nothing for that beer. And that's one of their biggest profitable items. So they want to keep it profitable. So they don't want to waste any of it. All right. Let's see what else. All right. Again, in Vitagon, we get a lot of people that come in here and start talking crap. And so if Justin accidentally kicked you out for no reason, then we apologize, dude. But I sympathize with Justin because sometimes we have people that come in here and start talking crap. So, so I apologize, but if that was taken out of context, but when you put like weird questions and stuff, Justin's here to make sure that we're talking about HVAC. So if you have something you want to talk to me about in Vitagon, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I'll talk to you about anything, but while we're in a stream, we want to try to keep it to HVAC related. So, all right. Let's see what else. Yeah. Beer on my mind. Exactly. What do you consider to be a fair price for a quality professional set of AC gauges? If you're going to buy digital gauges, whether it be Testos or Field Piece, I'm a Field Piece fan, but a lot of people like the Testos. I would imagine you're going to spend $500 to $600. These days I'd say $500 to $800 probably, depending on what set you go with. So depending on if you're buying all the fancy digitals and all that stuff. What I would highly suggest you do if you can't find a decent price at your local supply house is I would implore you to go over to TrueTech Tools. If you use the Shop Talk discount code, whether it be for Testo. Well, for Testo, you got to do some weird stuff to get special pricing, but you can get a discount on Testo stuff and you can get a discount on Field Piece stuff. Just go to TrueTech Tools. And when it asks for an offer code, use Shop Talk if you're going to buy Field Piece stuff. And that's for Zach Ciota's channel. He gets, I don't know, whatever. He's got an offer code there. So, but you'll get a good deal from TrueTech. I buy a lot of tools from TrueTech Tools. So, no, I'm not a basketball fan, but I don't watch any sports. So I really didn't watch any of that stuff. All right. Okay, cool. Have you seen compressor terminal venting? Yes, I have seen a compressor terminal venting. Now, no, Ralph. I shouldn't say I've seen it. It's never happened while I was looking at it. No, I've been up on a system where a terminal's gone and it's blown the charge, but I've never actually seen it happen while I was there. So, let's see what else we got here. All right, guys, let's get some more questions in here. I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes to put in, to this and see if you guys throw any more questions in here. So like when it's hot out, HVAC North, dude, thank you so very much, man. I really appreciate it, dude. You guys, any of you guys that do these super chats, I really don't do this to get the super chats. I really appreciate it, but I'm just trying to share the little bit of knowledge that I have. So thank you guys very much for those of you that have chosen. And those of you that don't, I'm not asking for it. It's all good. Okay. I really appreciate all you guys. Okay. It really does. I'm a very narcissistic person. I'm going to be honest with you. I love to read comments. I love to see likes. I love to see numbers. I like to see emails. It is what it is. I'm not going to lie. Okay. So any feedback I get from you guys, I love it. It really does feed me. Okay. I got no friends. I got no life. I make these videos. It is what it is. So, when you guys comment, when you guys do this stuff, I read every comment. I read every single one, guys. I may not be able to answer every single one, but I try to get to them. So thank you guys very much for all of you guys that come in here. Okay. Um, yeah. Justin Adams. I'm not an HVAC person. Okay. It's just one of the things, dude. Down here in Southern California, we say HVAC. We don't see HVAC. Okay. But up north, they say HVAC. It is what it is. It's odd when I hear people say I'm an HVAC tech. No, I'm an HVAC tech. But Apple's, whatever. It is what it is. So how am I handling Manitowoc Poor Tech Service? I've been handling it for years, Mr. Ice. It's one of those things, dude. It's just one of those unfair practices, I think, but Manitowoc sells so many ice machines and it's just a giant corporation. They can't honestly hire enough technicians, being that they are just looking at numbers anymore these days, right? So they have some really great tech support guys. I have a business relationship with one of the tech support guys that's here in Southern California, a great guy. But it's very rare that I get to talk to him because dispatch usually doesn't send me to him. They're just numbers essentially. And, tech support for almost anybody sucks these days. It's just one of those things, any of these manufacturers, they used to care about their tech support and they used to have enough tech support staff, but now they sell these machines for so cheap. You want to know what the real problem is. The real problem is that these ice machine manufacturers and these air conditioning manufacturers, they sell direct to the customers. That's the biggest problem. They wouldn't be buying so much equipment. They wouldn't be making so much equipment if they didn't sell to the customers. If they were letting us as contractors sell equipment, the customers wouldn't be replacing it as much. So you see where the dilemma is, because Manitowoc, Delafield, whoever it is, Carrier, any of them, right? They have national accounts and they sell direct to them. Or some of them say they don't sell direct, but they do. They have other methods of selling direct. Justin, thank you so very much, man. Just Russ, you see a little hint in the background, don't you? But yeah. So, the problem is that they're selling direct and they're selling so many products that they can't keep up with the demand. That's the issue that I see. So it is just one of those things. And it makes us techs have to learn more and be able to diagnose things without asking for help. It's kind of sad because I remember a day when you could call tech support and you didn't have to wait 4 hours for them to call you back. That's something that sucks. But that happens with Carrier. That happens with Manitowoc, Hoshizaki. They're all the same, dude. All the tech supports suck. All right, let's see what else. R1234YF. As far as I don't do any industrial work, Sagittarius 88, but I do know that was used in cars for a while. So Adam, thank you, bud. That's really cool, man. TXV valve. Yeah. You know what drives me nuts is when someone calls a compressor a pump. That used to drive me nuts. I used to have a guy that worked for me and he would always say, yeah, the pump's bad. What do you mean the pump's bad? Is it an ice machine? No, the compressor. Oh, okay. That drives me nuts. All right. I really appreciate you all doing this. This is really cool. So, so why do some compressors have fans on their heads like the big compressors? Well, it's just because that they have very high discharge temps and they have to move air across the head of that compressor to try to cool it off. You'll typically see that on a piston semi-hermetic compressors. On some of the big ones, they'll have cooling fans on the top, and then you'll also see that on discus compressors a lot too, where they have a cooling fan on the top. You'll also see that on water-cooled compressors, and it's because they're not typically in a traditional condensing unit. You got to think about it like a reciprocating compressor. A hermetically sealed compressor typically has a condenser fan motor blowing across the head of the compressor. And the compressors are usually strategically placed in the condenser fan motor discharge, so that way it moves that air across, and that air coming out of the discharge is actually cooler than the head of the compressor, so it's helping it to cool. So, okay. Let's see what else. See what else we got. Chris, when you swap out equipment like reach-ins, what happens to the old ones? Do they get fixed, sold? You would think they'd be like used cars. No, I don't. I mean, there's some people out there, Joseph, that buy that equipment, but it's not beneficial for me as a company to try to repair that equipment. It's too much of a headache. So in all honesty, when I change out refrigerators and different things, we just recover the refrigerant, dispose of it properly, and then we'll take the unit to the scrapyard. We really don't make very much money by taking it to the scrapyard. And yes, I could go cut them open, but it's really not feasible for me to pay a tech to cut them open. And it's not really worth my time. I'd rather be spending it at home with my family than spending 5-6 hours up at the office every Saturday cutting stuff apart. So typically we'll just take it to the scrapyard. If I'm doing a package unit replacement, I have a guy that I'll recover the refrigerant and he disposes of the unit for me. And what he does is he goes and cuts them up and sells them. But he comes to me with a delivery truck that's fully insured, a flatbed that's not falling apart. It's not a Toyota pickup truck trying to put a 15-ton unit on it. I mean, he's a legit delivery truck driver. And actually, we have a deal. He usually delivers my units to me. He gets paid by whoever he's picking up the unit from. And then I pay him to get rid of the unit. So he does all right. It's just one of those things. You know, some people save their scrap, and that's to each their own. It's just not really feasible for me. I don't have a yard where I don't have forklifts and different things like that where I could drop package units and whatnot. So I just take them to the dump, essentially. Bill Burnett, really, man. Okay, so here's the deal, guys. I'll show you. I have a shirt back here, all right? And I was using Teespring, okay? But Teespring sucks because I've ordered so many shirts, and this is the only one that came half-ass decent. And it took 2 weeks to get that shirt. So I will not be using Teespring because I don't want you guys to be waiting 3 weeks to get a shirt. That's stupid. And I've heard nothing but complaints about Teespring too. I'm currently working with someone right now. Okay. So, Adam in here, A-Team Adam turned me on to someone, and I'm talking to that guy. And then I'm also talking to someone else too. Guys, I'm so picky about my merch. I know that people have asked me about merch, and I'm going to do it eventually. I'd also like to come up with something a little less plain than what that is. That's just my logo. So it'll come. It's just going to take some time. So, all right. All right, guys, for those of you that are just coming in, I know I mentioned it before. Okay. I'm going to mention it one more time because I know people come and go with this. Let's try to help out our buddy Zach. Had an incident yesterday. His house burnt down. I'm going to scroll through this real quick. Okay. So, personally, guys, I'm going to be sending Zach a check. Okay, I have his address. If any of you are interested in Zach's address, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I will share his address with you. He's told me that's okay, but I just don't want to put it in the chat. And then also, you guys can donate to his PayPal account via his email address, hvacshoptalk@gmail.com. And if you guys want to, you can... yeah, Adam turns me on. Yeah, that's right. Adam turned me on to a guy. Come on. But yeah, if you guys do donate to Zach via PayPal, make sure you select friends and family. Okay. Again, his house burnt down. Just anything that you guys can do to help would really, really help him out. Okay. All the other HVAC YouTuber guys are going to be posting about this too. So Zach's a really cool guy and we just want to help him out. All right. I'm going to go off on that. All right. What else we got in here, guys? Questions. Is there a vid about what's on the back wall? No. Well, I mean, you talking about my smoke detector board? Yeah, there's a video where I made a smoke. That's just a trainer board that I made for my techs, so that way we can diagnose smoke detectors. So yes, I do have a video about that. And then up there, right there, is a hermetic compressor analyzer. We used to use those to start up a compressor. Essentially, if you had bad starting components, it would test it has starting components in it. There's another hermetic compressor analyzer right there. That's an older Annie A1. And then back there is a Simpson meter that used to be my dad's. That's an old school way of testing airflow. Trying to think of the name of that right now. This is a dial-a-charge right here. This is how we used to charge systems before we had electronic scales that were accurate. When you wanted to charge a system in ounces, you would essentially fill it up to the liquid level and you could see the mark for the ounces in the system. Yeah, and then there's some other stuff. My kids' Legos. My daughter likes to build Legos and put them in there on display in my videos and stuff. So hopefully that explains what I got back there. Okay. All right, guys. I'm gonna probably end this unless you guys got some other questions you want to put in here. Okay. Anybody else have questions? I'll get to them, but we're probably going to start wrapping this up because we've been rambling for an hour and a half. So, let's see. Just got in 15 minutes ago. I know, Ted. Sorry. Do I hire techs with only school experience? How do you field train procedures? So, no, I don't. But if a tech comes to me with field experience, I've done that before. I've hired them every single way. I've hired techs green that didn't know anything. Right now, I'm currently training an apprentice that he finished trade school, and that's it. He has no field experience. He's doing a really good job right now. He's mechanically inclined, and he's working out really well. So I've hired other techs that have come out of school before. I've hired techs without school. It just depends on the situation. I've hired service techs that have, used to run their own businesses, and they decided they wanted to go work for someone, which was probably really smart of them, because sometimes that seems like a nice idea to me too. But yeah, I've gone every which way with hiring people. So Mr. Johnny Boy, I cannot answer any questions about pneumatic thermostats, but I took a class on pneumatics in 2001, maybe 2002, and that's about all I know about pneumatics. So sorry. I never see any nests in my videos. Have the wasps left California too? That's very interesting, John Watson. When I was coming up in the trade, there was wasps everywhere, but we don't have them very much anymore. You're right. Occasionally I'll see a wasp nest, but I don't see them as much as I used to. That's interesting. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys. Do I ever get discounts at places you've worked at? Like, do you work at restaurants and they give you a coupon instead of something else? Okay, so in Vitagon, that's a good question. I get offered free food. I kid you not, every single day. And it's kind of become a thing to me that I don't eat in the restaurants that I work at. It's not that I don't like them, but here's the dilemma. I work in restaurants all day long. And when I go home, my family, they've been staying home all week long, and they want to go out to dinner. And I never want to go out to dinner because I used to eat in the restaurants all the time, right? Because they gave me free food. So I stopped accepting free food. Every once in a blue moon, I'll let someone buy me a hamburger, but it's very rare anymore, okay? Now, there's also some restaurants that I wouldn't eat at if you paid me because they're disgusting. But most of the restaurants that I work in are not that gross. And what you guys think is gross, if you think something's gross in one of my videos, is actually not that bad because there's some really nasty stuff out there. But so, has someone tried to pay me in coupons? Yeah, and we just say no. We're not interested in that. We had someone pay us in tortillas one time because they couldn't pay their bill. And they used to make tortillas, like raw tortillas, and we let them pay the remainder of their bill off in tortillas. We went for like 6 weeks and got tortillas. That was before I was any part of this ownership. That was my dad's thing. It's kind of funny to laugh about. All right. People are trying to barter like back in the day. Yeah, I don't deal with that crap anymore. Ever worked on R744 equipment? R744? Are you fucking with me? Is that water? Or is that CO2? No, I haven't worked on it. I can't remember. Isn't R744 water? I can't remember, dude. No, it's CO2. No, I've never worked with CO2, dude. I've seen it. I couldn't remember if you were fucking with me. R717 is water, isn't it? I think it is. But yeah, no, I've never worked with CO2 systems. So, Justin B, thank you very much, man. Dude, I do not have the best channel. I just have the channel that you're interested in, man. There's tons of other guys that have bitchin' channels, and there's channels, that I'm really intrigued by. A-Team Adams in here, and he's making this sheet metal series that he's doing, and I dig that stuff. He's showing some old tools, and he's showing the processes. Ted shows some great stuff too in his channel. He's anti-DIY HVAC. All these guys have cool channels. It's just what you're interested in. So I don't have the best channel, dude. But thank you for saying that. So. Are you familiar with Copeland rust inhibitor screwing up TXVs? Yeah, I remember that one. That one couldn't go unnoticed by everybody. That was a whole thing, man. All right. Thanks, JH. You have a good evening, too. All right, cool. I'm going to wrap this up. I am going to say goodnight to all you guys. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys again very much. If you guys have questions, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. R717's ammonia. There you go. You're smart, dude. Which one's water? Water's one of them, too. That confuses everybody. But anyways, sure, Ted does. All right. Really appreciate it, guys. We will catch you guys on the next one. I'm going to go ahead and transition back into the exit of the video, and we'll see you guys next time.